Something that I always have to remember is that whole idea that a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And so it's important for you to take the time to plan it right, whether it's a vacation, whether it's a big decision, or whether it's for your retirement.
Wise words, Victor.
What will you do when your money works for you? Welcome to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast with your hosts, Victor and Kim Gaxiola. From the home office in California, here is Victor and Kim.
You know, it's so funny. I'm watching the HGTV Very Brady renovation project, and I'm thinking, wow, how times have changed, right? We could do a whole session on financial planning for the Very Brady family. It would be fun. But I think the times have changed, so we're going to keep it relevant. And we are going to talk about Keegan and Taylor Rosen. So don't worry about, I'm not giving away any secret information. This is my favorite sample client from the millennium generation. And we're going to talk about how planning is good for all generations. So it's not just about the older generations who are looking at retiring, but there's a lot of things that Keegan and Taylor would like to do before they start having kids. And a lot of it has to do with their wish lists, with their finances. And so I want to tell you a little bit about this family.
So the original blended family, the Bradys, right?
Well, that was Keegan and Taylor. They don't have any kids yet.
Okay.
So,
well, before you go on though, Keegan and Taylor, I asked the question, which one's the male, which one's the female?
So Keegan is the female and Taylor is the male.
Okay.
Unlike our niece Taylor, who is the female, our favorite goddaughter.
Shout out to Taylor, yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Taylor. So Keegan and Taylor, they have a little bit of student loans left to pay. They are 34 and 37 years old. Keegan's 34, Taylor's 37. And so they are at that point where they've been married a couple years and they're really starting to look at, they want to settle down, they want to buy a house, they want to have kids, but they want to do everything in the right order.
They live the American dream.
Absolutely. Everybody should be able to do that, right? But it does take some careful planning, especially these days, because it seems like you come into a lot of questions and a lot of difficult things planning their finances. They happen to live in San Francisco, so it's pretty expensive out there.
Ouch.
I know. I was on a call with somebody the other day, and they said, so how much should we put in for rent if we're looking at people in the San Francisco Bay Area? Because they had a sample client with $1,200 rent payment. We're like, maybe $2,500 if you're lucky, but rent could be up in the $3,000. Right?
Where were they renting for $1,200?
I know. No, that was in other places in the United States.
Oh, okay. In San Francisco, you're lucky if that gets you a mattress with a tree with shade.
And a tent. So there's a lot of expenses going on in their world. And so we're going to look at how we might be able to help them out.
So this is a very common scenario, right? You get this young couple, no kids yet, but a lot of goals, a lot of dreams. And, they both work, so they're bringing in some income. I think in many cases around here, they call them Henrys. Right? You know what that means, right?
Yes.
Okay, what does it mean?
High earner, no, not rich yet.
Not rich yet. That's correct. So Henrys, if you hear us refer to Henrys, that's what we're talking about. So Keegan and Taylor, come in. What's up? What are they going to do?
So I told you, they wanted to settle down. They want to buy a home and have some kids. But they know that having kids is not cheap. They're going to have to pay for their college tuition. They certainly don't want them to be bogged down by the student debt that held them back. They also would, like to settle down in a home before they do that. And let's see, what else are their needs? I can't think. I think that those are primarily what they need right now. So there's lots of questions here. How do we do it all? or can we do it all? And what is most important to Keegan and Taylor? Is it having those kids, or is it getting in that house first? You know, time is running out. I mean, I hate to say that, but she's 34. And so it's really important, if you are going to have kids, to start trying soon, because you don't know how long that's going to take you, let alone if you're going to need to finance having kids, because if you can't have them naturally, it's pretty expensive for treatment.
So they're faced with some tough choices here. And we're talking about making decisions that have big implications: buying a house, having children, paying off student debt. So what is the process to help them out?
Right. So a detailed, lengthy conversation, maybe 2 or 3, that's going to go into just getting all the data, because sometimes it doesn't all come out at first. And the more data we get, the more questions we ask. And once we finally have all of that in our system, I like to think of our system like the financial Waze, right? You're on Waze and it tells you how long it's going to take you to get there. And if you decide to stop off the road to get something to eat on your long road trip, you know, that's going to take some time. Also, if there's an accident, they're going to tell you about that accident, and they may give you a different road to take. So that's what we have here in our system, is really a way to look at all of the ingredients, right? All the data points, and then figure out, prioritize. So I'm going to have a conversation with Keegan and Taylor after I've got all their data. I'm just going to talk to them about what's most important to them.
Right. I really like, and I know we keep using it, but I really think that the analogy of Waze to relate it to the financial planning process that and the work that you do is so good, because I think people are very familiar with Waze. And what I love about it is, you know, you put your destination. So you're in point A, you need to get to point B, and it's making adjustments along the way, not unlike, you know, a proper financial plan, because there's some what ifs that you can't plan for and some that you can plan for. And so I just keep loving this analogy, just because you do have to make adjustments along the way, because no one's life is linear. I mean, no one can predict, you know, that getting from point A to point B is not going to be a straight line. It's more of that squiggly line, you know, because there'll be different things and different facets. You know, you could have the best plan in place, and then there's a fire and the house burns down, or, you know, there's you get in a car accident, now you're disabled, you know, so I love that analogy, just because having traveled with Waze now, and you know that this is the case with me, because usually you're a passenger, is I used to sometimes bucket, like, and saying, I know how to get there. I know how to get to my destination. And yeah, Waze says to turn off this weird side street. I'm not going to do that. And then sure enough, had I turned on the side street, you know, I would have gotten there at the estimated time. And so now I've learned to trust the algorithm. And I think that this is where the financial planning software and the process is so good, because it allows you to put in those bumps in the road.
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to take that one step further. Actually, maybe 2 steps. One is, okay, here's something that's really interesting, because us as financial planners, we use software to help us arrive at decisions for our clients. However, you know, there's a lot of talk about robo-planners out there. And I'm going to tell you that I've taken Waze one time, and it told me to get off the 80 when I was driving from Lake Tahoe back to home, and told me to get off the 80 and take some crazy, I think Donner Pass. And it was snowing and visibility was horrible at the time. And that was the worst decision I made. And I'm, you know, got my hands tightly on the steering wheel, gripping it, because I've got to be super careful when I'm driving on Donner Pass. And I tell you, the next time I'm going to be a lot more mindful when I'm driving that, because if weather conditions are a little sketchy, I'm not going to take that way. I'm just going to go straight. I don't care how long it takes me, how much traffic is on the 80. I'm just going to go straight, because that's just not something you should do. And I know that from my experience. And so I bring that story in, because also when you're using software, there's a lot of experience that I'm going to bring into these conversations that have nothing to do with what the software is telling me. Because I know, because I've seen people live through so much. And there's a lot more conversation. There's a lot more color to the conversation when you're working with a planner.
Right. I think part of that has to do with the context, from the standpoint that, Waze is looking at all the conditions and maybe some different reports to point you in that direction. But Waze doesn't know that maybe you're driving a car that doesn't have four-wheel drive, right? That would have required chains in order for you to drive in an area. So there's a lot of context. And I think that when you relate that to financial planning, it could be that, yes, let's say that the software makes a certain suggestion, or there is a suggestion, let's say that in order for you to meet your goals, you're going to need to be more aggressive in your portfolio. But if the risk tolerance for a person and you knowing that is much lower, that may not be the appropriate course of action. So there's still that human element, right? So yes, the software or Waze is more of a complement to the relationship that you have with your clients to be able to at least steer them in the right direction, but you know them better than the algorithm does.
Right. So let's talk about priorities.
Okay.
Because this is fun. So let's say you have 4 days to drive to go on vacation, 4 days to go on vacation. You just want to, road trip, get away somewhere. Where are you going to go? To Santa Barbara, or are you going to try to take a road trip to Colorado?
I think I'd rather go to Santa Barbara. It's a little bit closer. Colorado for a drive seems a little far.
I know, right? And you have 4 days to go there.
Right.
So, and 2 days is probably going to take you in travel time to get to Colorado.
Get there. So I'll just get there, and then maybe I'll have something to eat and come right back.
Right. And so the reason why I ask you that is because, going back to Keegan and Taylor, they love living in San Francisco. But they have a lot of needs. So to get that urban feel, how important is it for them to live in San Francisco? Why can't they live in Denver or San Diego or my favorite, Nashville? Why can't they live in a different place? And because if they live somewhere else, they might be able to accomplish more than living in San Francisco. And so, you got to bring it back to choices. What's more important, the urban center, or is it because all of your family lives in San Francisco and you want to stay nearby your family? Those are the choices that we're going to make when we are talking, because if money is, it doesn't grow on trees, right? No. And we only get a certain amount every month in our paychecks, and we've got to live within our means, and we've got a laundry list full of things that we want to do. And so sometimes you have to play with the variables. Where do you live? Is this absolutely a must, no compromise? If it is a must, no compromise, then we're going to need to pull back some of the other things. Certainly your kids aren't going to be able to go to private school. And, maybe you won't be able to fund 100% of their college education. So these are the things that we have to think about. And this is really where the planning comes to life, is to be able to have these conversations, be able to show them in real time how long it's going to take them to get to arrive at all these places, to buy the home, and how much home can they afford, and to have kids, and to do all of these things. Where do we need to pull back some of these plans so that they can do as much as they possibly can? And it's really fun to do.
I think it's funny that we use kind of a vacation analogy, when it comes to the planning process, just because I think we used to say, and I still think it's true, that people spend more time planning their vacations in a year than they do planning for their own retirement, which is probably going to be the longest time off they're going to have. Right.
And so it's funny too, because, the retirement should be in the back burner. Like if you're Keegan and Taylor, they're in their 30s and they've got so much life to live before they're going to retire. However, if they're not preparing for it now, when will they be able to retire, right? And so sometimes I notice that people are so fixated on one goal, maybe buying that house or paying down the student debt, that they forget to also put some money down towards their future. And when I'm talking about future, I'm talking about retirement. So you should have different buckets going on for these long-term goals and the short-term priorities.
Right. And it's interesting just because I remember early in this process, and I'm glad we started saving early. They show those charts where, a person who accumulates, right, let's say makes a contribution to a saving or retirement plan at a younger age, doesn't need to contribute as much in order to have, the accumulation over the course of 30, 40 years. So the best thing that a young person has is time, to accumulate that. If you were to wait, even 5 years or 10 years, you would have to invest so much more and save so much more just to get to the same place as the person who is an early saver.
Right. So, Victor, there's so many components to Keegan and Taylor's plan. It's going to be challenging, right? Because, let's just talk about student loan planning in there. What I'm seeing these days when I look at some of my clients is a lot of student debt. And when I look at the numbers underneath it all, like how much are they paying and how much is the debt and how much is the interest rate, doesn't make sense. This is something that I'm really excited. We're going to dive in deeper in another podcast because after further investigation, some of these student loans, they could have forever. They're like a big balloon payment because we just did one for somebody the other day, and we found out that probably 95% of the payment was going to interest.
Wow.
And I looked at the numbers. I'm like, how are they ever going to pay this off?
Yeah, the student debt situation in this country is much bigger than people think. The student debt situation in this country is much larger than people think. And so, yeah, we will be doing a deeper dive on, going through that subject and strategies and things that people should be thinking about. How do you address the student debt?
Yeah, originally I thought, but the national average is only around 30,000, so it's not that bad. And I've heard that argument a lot. It's definitely not like the housing crisis. However, the problem is that if you don't really look behind the numbers, you could start out with 30,000 in debt and easily end up with like 50 or 60,000 well after you've graduated.
Wow.
Even when you're paying it off.
Yeah. So what do you do? I mean, and I guess that this will be what we explore is what do you do? Do you pay that down or do you buy the house or do you start the family? These are all decisions that that people like Keegan and Taylor will need to make. And so I like the fact that the financial planning software, it's actually called the Decision Center, right? Where you go through these scenarios.
Right. So we're going to look at the cash flow, just daily, how they have a lot of income as they are Henrys out there. But they also love to spend money on entertainment and going out and whatnot. So we're really going to need to look at income versus expenses. And I know nowadays with high earners, it's just as hard as with low earners to figure out where to pare down in the case you need to be more serious about your budget. They also have restricted stock because they are typical people living in the Bay Area working at a tech company. And so we're going to look at that because that's a nice way to start selling stock and putting big chunks of money down for a down payment on a home. And so there's a lot of things going on with them. We're going to look at the simple question of, can they buy a home? Is it the right decision here in San Francisco or not?
And how does the cash flow fit into this? Because a lot of it is, in order for you to know how much money you have available to save or to pay down student debt, you have to look at how people are spending money, month to month, week to week.
That's right. And so this is where the software does come into play. We ask people if they really want help on the cash flow and the budgeting. We really need a commitment from them to be serious, because it's going to take a lot of time. And certainly we can't do it all as the planner. It is going to take a lot of activity on the side of the client to be monitoring how they're spending their money.
So simplistically, it really is an exercise in identifying all their current assets, all their existing liabilities, and then what the inflows and outflows are, right? To get a real full, comprehensive financial picture of who Taylor and Keegan are, to then arrive at a situation where once that foundation has been established, to help them make decisions.
Right. And all along, they're going to need to continue to put money into their retirement plan so that we can make sure that they are on course in the long term as well.
So what are some of the other areas of planning, that you focus on with clients outside of just retirement planning?
College planning, there's some of that going on as well. I do it a little differently than other people because I like to talk to them about creating a budget, whereas most people are like, I have no clue where my kid is going to go up. Look at us. Mika thought she was going to go to Berkeley, and now I think her plans are totally changing right in front of her as it gets closer and closer. So you can't always like count on what your children are saying maybe as a junior, right? There's a lot of uncertainty there. And so I always say, plan a budget. How much are you willing to pay for your child's education, and make it a goal and start saving for that. And then anything after that will be on them. So then your child has to determine, how much do I value the big ticket college education? Can I still get a degree somewhere a little less expensive and come out with less student debt? So lots of planning around that. I
think the other thing, which was interesting, especially in the case of Mika, Berkeley School of Music in Boston, and getting an expensive degree, is the reality of, okay, let's say you get the degree. What is the likelihood of you actually getting a job, and how much is that going to pay? It's something that plays into the equation now more so than I think it used to in the past. In the past, it was like, I'm going to go get a degree and then I'll be able to get a job. And now I think it's important for people to start thinking about, if they have a specific interest going into a certain industry or a certain profession, does that profession pay? Is there going to be a return on that investment such that, and I think that computer science is a good example, that they're in high demand right now. I mean, software developers, people who work in engineering, people who understand code is especially in high demand in areas like the Bay Area. And so you almost know that if that's what you go and study, that you're probably not going to have much of a challenge getting a high-paying job, because they exist and there's high demand. But if you go to study Russian literature, unless you're going to be a professor or a specialist or write books about it, I don't know if it's going to work out.
Right. That's so true. And even when you look at technology and engineering, there are programs now that are just specific on engineering, and hackathons and hack academies and whatnot, where you could go there and maybe you're not even paying that sticker price of a 4-year university, because now a lot of these companies are looking for specific skill sets, right? And as long as you have them, you can qualify and get a job there. So now it's not even like, I just need an engineering degree. It's, how much do I need a $70,000 a year engineering degree when I could maybe get a $30,000 engineering degree, still come out with the same skill set, and be able to apply for that job.
So these are just perfect examples of the various what ifs, right? You can plug into the software and take a look at what the impact is to the bottom line and to your accumulation of assets in retirement. And the type of lifestyle that you can have if you make those kinds of decisions. Because when we talk about college education planning, I think is a good example, because it's yet another 18 to 20 year kind of time horizon. If you start planning right when the child is born, that gives you a lot more benefits of making those adjustments early on and then tracking that as they get to the point where they actually go to school and they start pulling those funds out.
Right. And in the end, the advice is always the same: save early and save often. Because, think about us when we were married and living in Miami, Florida. Mm-hmm. And we didn't actually know all of the steps in our plan. We had a lot of goals, mm-hmm. but we knew that was going to include having to have a good savings, a healthy savings account, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were just saving.
Mm-hmm. Right. We knew we wanted to buy a house, and we did that once we moved to the Chicago area. And then we knew we wanted to have a family. And then once we had a family, we knew we wanted to start saving for their education. And now this is what's weird and scary, is it's becoming a reality. I mean, with Mika as a senior, all that planning, all that foresight is starting to come together. And it's I know we're not alone in it, thinking it's a little scary.
Right. And it's funny too, because we saved and saved for all of those things. And from time to time, we used some of those funds for other things. Like when we moved to California and mm-hmm. we had to buy a house, mm-hmm. we had to pull money from, college accounts, and we felt really bad about that. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we knew we needed to invest in our family's home and get everybody secure in our own house. And so we did that. And looking back, I can say that was really, I'm glad we did it. At the time, I felt really bad about making that decision. However, I am glad we did that for the benefit of where we are now. But you really do have to think about what you're doing and whether or not it's a good investment decision or not. Mm-hmm. I'm just thankful that we had saved all of that and that it was available for us to use in one way or another mm-hmm. for our family.
Right, it's the squiggly lines.
Right.
It's not the linear path. And it goes back to full circle, the decision center. It's often when people ask me, what is it that you do? What is it that we do? I always say to people, we help people make better financial decisions. Because when it comes down to it, I've always maintained that these are the decisions that our clients make. And the best we can do is coach them in choosing which path makes the most sense based on everything that we know about them. And sometimes being extremely unemotional about it, right? More surgical. At least I see you do that.
Right.
And I think that's an important component that, again, the algorithm is going to be not, surgical. The algorithm is going to be completely, unemotional. That doesn't mean you can't be empathetic. And there's a big difference between emotional and empathetic.
That's right. And certainly when it comes to this, there is a lot of human input and a lot of computer modeling that goes into both of this. So it really is a blend.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you're interested in finding out a little bit more or just taking for a trial run some of the software that we're using to help our clients make better decisions, we invite you to follow the link that's available through the show notes, and it's also on our website, to go into what we like to call our financial sandbox. Once you go in, you just need to plug in a little bit of information, and you can either choose to do a savings goal or a retirement goal, and then start getting a sense of the power of this software and this technology to help you make these decisions. And of course, if you want to do a much deeper dive and talking about all the various variables that Kim talked about, and adding complexity to the decisions, we can certainly do that as well, just by establishing an appointment, going through the process, and then explaining to you exactly what it all entails.
Right. And I cannot stress enough, don't get discouraged. You're looking at those savings goals, retirement goals, or whatnot. This is just the beginning conversation, right? Because the software that we use when we really go into the nuts and bolts is so much deeper dive than what you'll find there. But at least you can start thinking in terms of how to get you where you want to go.
Something that I always have to remember is that whole idea that a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And so it's important for you to take the time to plan it right, whether it's a vacation, whether it's a big decision, or whether it's for your retirement.
Wise words, Victor. And looking back now again at the Brady family, we thought they were so complicated back then, but only to find out when we look at Keegan and Taylor Rosen that times have changed. They become a whole heck of a lot more complicated.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine having 6 kids?
I know, right?
Yikes.
Ooh.
It's hard enough with 2.
But they only had 2 bedrooms for those kids.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, it was funny watching the program just because it brought back a lot of memories of watching the show with my sisters. And the fact that, it's funny because at the time it didn't seem like unusual to me that they used to have like a live-in maid.
Right.
What was her name again?
Alice.
Alice. Yeah. How strange, right? I guess you would need it, though, if you had 6 kids. But I guess he was making a lot of money as an architect. It wouldn't happen now. Would an architect even be able to afford, full-time care for 6 kids?
I know. I didn't watch it very much, but did she stay at home or did she work?
I don't remember. I don't think she worked. But I'd have to go back and watch it. Can we stream it? Like stream the Brady Bunch?
I don't know.
All right, well, so thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Once again, I'm Victor Gaxiola and my co-host,
Kim Gaxiola.
And remember, what will you do
when your money works for you?
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, please send an email to victor@techgirlfinancial.com or join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AskTGF. We also encourage you to follow us on the Tech Girl Financial page on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Tech Girl Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Skrrr!